Hooked on birds. I love to watch them behave, their different behaviors. I love to see the colors. I love to watch some of them dance. I remember my mother driving down when I was in high school, and we watched the phalaropes do their mating dance right in the middle of the road. And so it's just all those things. It's just a passion.
Klamath Basin features a wide variety of habitats that provide for incredible biodiversity, including open water, marshes, meadows, juniper woodlands, and rocky cliffs, making it a crucial junction for migratory birds. The basin is perhaps most famous for the open water and marsh habitats provided by Upper Klamath Lake and the 6-member Klamath Basin National Wildlife Refuge Complex. Wet meadows in the Upper Klamath and Klamath Marsh National Wildlife Refuges are home to Sora, Virginia rail, and the elusive yellow rail. And Upper Klamath Lake provides nesting habitat for dancing western and Clark's grebes. The refuges host upwards of 80% of the migrating waterfowl that use the Pacific Flyway, numbering at times to over 1 million birds. Lower Klamath and Tule Lake are the largest refuges in the complex. Historically, they supported some of the greatest autumn and spring concentrations of migrating waterfowl in North America. These refuges and the surrounding agricultural lands also provide hunting grounds for one of the densest concentrations of wintering raptors in the country. Indeed, the basin hosts the largest wintering concentration of bald eagles in the lower 48 states, many of which roost together in Bear Valley National Wildlife Refuge. Over the long term, waterfowl abundance on the refuge complex averaged about 1 million in autumn and about 360,000 in spring. A record-breaking peak count of 5.8 million waterfowl was recorded September 24th through 25th in 1958. The Klamath Basin is situated in a high desert transition zone between the southern Cascades and the northern Sierra Nevada mountains. The basin forms a natural corridor for migrants traveling between major wintering areas in California's Central Valley and Mexico. Few areas in North America support such an impressive mix of waterfowl populations from different source areas. The location of the Klamath Basin in the Pacific Flyway creates a situation unique to North America. Tule Lake and Lower Klamath provide resting and feeding habitat for 80% of the ducks in the Pacific Flyway and have been described as North America's greatest goose concentration area. They are also listed as key conservation sites for birds in North America. Over 30 species of waterfowl and numerous species of shorebirds, waders, and other wetland-dependent birds migrate through the Klamath Basin. Less water and bird habitat are contributing factors to a scaled-back 36th annual Winter Wing Festival. The Winter Wings Festival, hosted by the Klamath Audubon Society, attracts birders, nature photographers, and the general public from not only the United States but around the world. Winter Wings generates approximately $500,000 for the Klamath Basin's economy and is a positive influence on local businesses. But with the lack of water and habitat present in the basin, there are concerns about this economic boost not being as profound in past years. The festival brings in about 500 to 600 attendees a year, creating a community who is passionate about both the birds and the basin in which they live.
Our attendance is a little bit down, but we did that on purpose because we weren't sure about the drought and we didn't want to stress out the birds more than they already are. So we did kind of make it a little bit less.
Autumn abundance on the refuge during the past decade has declined about 46%, or about 450,000 birds per day less. However, spring waterfowl abundance has increased by 11%, averaging about 40,000 more birds per day. Northern pintails, which once had a major presence on the Klamath refuges, declined to less than 30% of their pre-1970s autumn populations. In the 1950s and 1960s, these species accounted for more than 60% of all waterfowl staging in autumn on Klamath Basin's National Wildlife Refuges. Presently, they have yet to recover to anything approaching their former numbers. However, a long-term decline in waterfowl use of Tule Lake's National Wildlife Refuge has raised questions about the quality of its wetland habitat. Management programs to enhance productivity of refuge wetlands have been developed to address these concerns. Waterfowl abundance, species composition, and distribution on Klamath Basin's refuge have fluctuated over the decades and have been influenced by events such as productivity on breeding grounds and habitat conditions on wintering grounds that cause shifts in migration patterns. A major challenge for the future appears to be the availability of adequate water for wetland management on the Klamath Basin's refuge. The Klamath Basin has suffered an ongoing water crisis since 2001, when water was shut off to irrigators in the Klamath Project to maintain high water levels for endangered suckerfish in Upper Klamath Lake. Mandatory flow levels in the Klamath River for salmon also restrict water deliveries. The crisis has continued in years since, with the fall waterfowl population survey showing a steady decline in waterfowl use of the basin.
It's just the water levels are drastically down these last couple of years, and I think that's played a part of the refuge as well.
In the overall allocation of water in the Klamath Basin, the National Wildlife Refuges have the lowest priority of water and are most likely to go dry when drought strikes. In 2011, even though precipitation in the region was higher than normal, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation was forced to completely shut off water deliveries to the Klamath Refuge Complex wetlands and roughly 200,000 acres of irrigated agriculture. Furthermore, the cost of electricity for moving water has increased 400% since 2006, which has made it more difficult for the complex to flood its wetlands, and even when water is available. Even in wet years, it can be difficult for the Klamath Basin refuges to obtain all the water they need. In 2013, however, the Lower Klamath Lake National Wildlife Refuge has suffered a complete cutoff of water since early spring. As a result, over 2 million ducks and geese arriving for their 4-week annual spring staging event stayed only 1 week. The spring staging event is important to waterfowl because the birds use it to put on necessary body fat before their long migration to breeding grounds in the prairie potholed region and other points north. A general shortage of water throughout the Klamath Basin is made worse by the fact that the refuges have the lowest priority of water in the basin compared with threatened endangered fish species, tribal water rights, and agriculture. Over the last couple of years, the lack of water on the refuges has also exacerbated outbreaks of the avian cholera and avian botulism due to overcrowding on the remaining available wetlands. In the spring of 2012, an estimated 10,000 to 20,000 ducks and geese perished from the avian cholera. Since 2010, California Waterfowl Association has been working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Bureau of Reclamation in building infrastructure needed to flood large blocks of farmland along the edge of the Tule Lake Refuge, thus providing additional wetland acreage on the refuge. These walking wetlands will result in an additional 1,400 acres of wetland habitat to hunters and wildlife at the Tule Lake Refuge. The outcome of these projects has provided to be beneficial to wildlife and farmers alike within the Klamath Basin. Projects have allowed for the flooding and management of wetland habitat while still providing flexibility for wildlife-friendly farming on a rotational basis. The flooded acreage at Tule Lake provides excellent shallow water habitat and feed for migrating waterfowl. An adequate water delivery infrastructure would allow for better water transport to support these wetlands. A major concern of refuge managers in the future will be securing adequate water supplies for Lower Klamath and Tule Lake National Wildlife Refuges, as available water resources in the Klamath River drainages are seriously overallocated. Water issues in the Klamath Basin have been a concern of national importance in recent years. Pintails and Arctic geese can return to numbers characteristic of earlier decades. The Klamath Basin Refuge Complex serves as a critical junction in the Pacific Flyway. Periodic fluctuations in breeding ground populations, wintering ground habitat, and local conditions will continue to produce the ebb and flow patterns observed in waterfowl abundance on the Klamath Basin complex. Throughout these variations, it is important that Klamath Basin National Wildlife Refuge Management continues to meet the needs of waterfowl and the uncounted thousands of other migratory birds that depend on these ancestral habitats for critical staging, wintering, and breeding requirements. But perhaps, if the citizens of the basin are persistent and resilient, over time these problems will drive them to a reinvented sense of communality.